Hello, I'm iamYannC, and you are listening to episode 16 of the Our Weekly Highlights podcast for issue 2020-48, released on November 30th, 2020. This week's issue was curated by Mael Salmon with help from the Our Weekly team members and contributors. In last week's highlight podcast, we mentioned one of the few silver linings of the current state of the world is the various conferences and workshops that have made their excellent content available on demand, whether recording of presentations or materials from workshops. For our first highlight today, we have another recent workshop that's sure to give you a practical on-ramping to creating your first R package. At a recent Our Ladies Philly virtual meetup held on November 12th, biostatistician Shannon Peligi led a workshop titled Your First R Package in 1 Hour, Tools That Make R Package Development Easy, which you can view the recording of on YouTube, linked in the supplements section of this podcast. It's one thing to have the workshop available, but Shannon has gone above and beyond to author an accessible and concise blog post with a step-by-step tour of the process of creating a new package utilizing packages mentioned in many of the previous highlights in this podcast, like DevTools and Use This. Some particularly nice touches include the use of an animated GIF to illustrate the outputs of some key functions in the beginning of the process alongside static screenshots, and the helpful sidebar entries with pointers and links to external resources, which, by the way, is made possible by the Distill R package. One cool tidbit is found in her discussion of the notes outputted from a DevTools check function call, where some of the notes include no visible binding for global variables. This is a very common issue to encounter when creating a package that involves a portion of the tidyverse, and a portion of the aforementioned workshop recording covers solutions around this perplexing occurrence. But if you are a bit intimidated by creating an R package from scratch, we highly recommend you take a look at Shannon's blog post to give you that, again, gentle on-ramping to getting you started on the right foot. Back in episode 3 of this Highlights podcast for issue 2020-35, we shared the announcement of Magrider version 2.0 coming soon and some background on the history of the famous pipe operator. Well, in our second highlight today, the release of Magrider 2.0 has landed on CRAN, and RStudio software engineer Lionel Henry has detailed the major changes in a new post on the Tidyverse blog. As this is likely the last major update for Magrider, the new features and enhancements for this release are especially noteworthy. One of those being the much more streamlined backtrace output that you can obtain after a pipeline encounters an error. In the past, you would be greeted with a multitude of calls to base R functions like eval and with visible, making it a bit difficult to decipher where exactly things broke down. Now you will see much less clutter made possible by the new backend written entirely in C. For those of you leveraging the pipe and looping structures, whether a for loop or calls to the apply family of functions or functions from the per package, the new rewrite of the backend could lead to significant and noticeable reductions in execution time and less calls to the garbage collector for freeing memory back up. Lastly, this release brings forward the idea of lazy evaluation for expressions in the pipeline, as the upcoming built-in pipe being developed for the next R version will use this paradigm as opposed to potential duplication or greedy evaluation. Again, this is a landmark release, and authors have stressed that this should be backward compatible with previous code that leveraged Magrider, but they do outline in the post some checks that you can do to make sure that your functions are compatible going forward. In our last highlight for today, for those of you that are learning Shiny and want to take your skills to the next level, especially if you're creating intermediate or complex applications, Some excellent materials are coming your way. One example is the upcoming Engineering Production Grade Shiny Apps textbook, authored by fellow R Weekly curator Colin Fay, alongside Sebastian Rochette, Vincent Guyader, and Shervin Gerard. The print version is set to be published very soon, but the entire book is available for free online now. In the latest update, a new section has been authored in the appendix that takes a similar approach as our first highlight in this episode by outlining a specific use case of creating a new Shiny app from scratch using the principles outlined in the previous chapters. This is a welcome addition to the book as it ties together how each step in the app development draws upon practical skills and clever use of the capabilities within the R and Shiny ecosystems. Of course, one of those tools being the awesome Golem package that is the centerpiece of it all. Even what can be a step that's glossed over, like getting to know the requirements of an application from the end user's perspective, is given particular attention. Anyone who has developed software products, one can consider a Shiny app as a software product, has certainly encountered the importance of getting to know these requirements ahead of time before going too far and having to rewrite a lot of things over again. Another great illustration is the use of non-Shiny components in R to help with prototyping the back-end functionality first, such as creating functions with tests and incorporating the narrative around the process of the business logic in an R Markdown document, say as a vignette to the app as a package. There are many additional nuggets of wisdom around user interface prototyping and deployment that are also mentioned in this appendix, and again, it is highly recommended if you are in this situation of taking your Shiny skills up another notch. And that'll wrap up episode 15 of this Highlights podcast. And as usual, this issue is jam-packed full of additional content for you to read across the many different uses of R. Some of which include new packages for creating very intuitive and friendly looking postcards entirely with R Markdown, summaries of additional takes on recent COVID-19 treatments that have been released, and much more. And if you'd like to listen to previous episodes, you can find a direct link to all the episodes at the top of the rweekly.org home site, and you can check out the back catalog for additional details on the recent highlights we've had in previous issues. Have a great week, and we will be back with another batch of our weekly highlights next week.